Okay, so our topic today on this fireside chat, so is it right, trust, accuracy, and explainability in AI-led finance? Before we get into it, it would be good to get an introduction from yourself, like who are Outmin, what do they do, and why this sort of topic, really?
Sure. So I'm CTO at Outmin. We are a startup founded about 5 years ago in 2020, and we are building an autonomous bookkeeping platform. So our mission and our goal is to build software that fully automates bookkeeping to the extent that we're replacing the task of bookkeeping. So rather than building or layering in AI to make bookkeeping tasks more efficient for bookkeepers, our goal is to fully replace bookkeeping and to build that autonomous replacement for bookkeeping. So kind of coming to the discussion today then, I think most businesses really care about their bookkeeping data being correct and being right. And so it's something that we think quite a lot about.
So what does right in that context mean, in the context of sort of AI-led decision-making in finance?
I think that, is it right? I was thinking about it, before we came up to the stage, obviously, and it's such a deceptively simple question. But actually, being right can mean so many different things. It can mean many different things to different people in different contexts. So it's very layered, and it'll probably mean different things to you or to different people in this room in their context, or to our customers and our users. But coming to the discussion today, I really thought about it in these 3 layers or 3 dimensions that we have in the title around trust, accuracy, and explainability. So I think starting with accuracy is the simplest. Or the most straightforward. I think especially if we just use my context in bookkeeping, we can think about the technical correctness of something relative to some standards or some definitions. We have accounting standards, there's definitions, domain constraints, and we can judge whether something is correct or right relative to those definitions. But what we've found in automating bookkeeping and building the platform that we're working on at Outmin is that accuracy and just sort of being technically correct really isn't enough. Really isn't enough for our customers. And so we have to explore these other meanings of what does it mean, is it right? And so then thinking about trust. So is it right in the sense that do our users actually believe that it's right? Do they trust that it's right? And how do we go about earning the trust of our customers, of our users, so that when something is technically correct, they also believe that it's technically correct? And that third dimension then is the explainability piece. And in this context here, I'm thinking about explainability as not only is it correct, not only do our users believe it's correct, but do they some level also understand why it's correct?
And they've got that lineage and stuff.
And that, that they've got that understanding, because I think they need that level, some level of understanding, belief that it's correct and understanding why it's correct in order to develop the confidence that they'll need on their side in order to actually act on that data. Because if we don't have confidence in the data in order to act on it, it's really useless. We don't have a product if we can't deliver data that is actually decision grade or action grade, and that enables someone to pick it up and go and make decisions, whether that's on a daily basis or on a quarterly basis, file their taxes or their annual compliance requirements. So the data needs to be useful, and in order for it to be useful, we need to develop that confidence.
So a lot of the questions yesterday we saw on Slido, and I would encourage you to add questions to Slido and anything. A lot of questions yesterday we talked about, is it right in the context of AI is bringing this non-deterministic world? But before the audience deluge us with questions, right, guys? There was something interesting you said there, and it was the people using your system had to trust your system. And so what are the strategies that you use to sort of build that trust with users? In terms of your process, in terms of your system, in terms of, yes, this is what we think your accounts are, but actually we're going to tell you why we think that's true.
Yeah. We have to use a lot of different strategies.
Right.
I always think to the example of autonomous driving. In what I think about there is the studies that have been done where despite how with autonomous vehicles there is a much lower rate of crashes, people are still very skeptical or very hesitant and less forgiving if there is a crash that is caused by an autonomous vehicle versus someone manually driving a car. So I think about trust in terms of there being an element of human nature is not to trust machines or to require a much higher bar if we are to trust sort of autonomous decision making versus something that's more human-led. So then also, I guess, just in terms of framing our qualities for building trust, we also have to understand whose trust we're trying to earn. So in our case, we are serving SMEs, small businesses, and the accountants, the accounting practices that serve them. So we really focus a lot on the accounting practice audience and earning their trust, because if we have a small business, if we earn the trust of their accountant, then we inherit the trust of the small business as well. But the accountants tend to be highly more skeptical, less forgiving sort of audience. So it really is quite a high bar that we have to clear, which is a challenge, but it's a positive challenge for us.
It reminds me a little bit, 15 years ago when UX was like sort of nascent, and we're always like that sort of bringing the user in there. It's got that sort of same thing that, and about autonomous driving made me think of that. Like if a machine makes an error, you can't call it malicious evil or get really, really angry at it. And I think your brain does sort of search for that, well, this isn't acceptable. Whereas if a human makes an error, you can sort of write a human off and go, they're a bad person and stuff like that. So it's got that sort of real sort of feel to it. I think like you said, so the things you said were like sort of the explainability. It was a sort of feature. That's an interesting challenge. Like, how do you approach it when automating bookkeeping? Like, what does explainability mean?
Sure, and I think it will change. You know, I think when the technology becomes more ubiquitous, then we start to cross the chasm, and we start to get more of that adoption and more of that comfort levels. But that'll take time, and we're still in those early days of this technology, especially where we're talking about giving in the word agent and in the word agency and in autonomous, we're sort of giving up some of our agency and we're giving up some of our autonomy when we're sort of handing over some of that responsibility over to AI-led sort of software and decision making. So let's talk about some of the strategies that we've taken. So around explainability and building trust, we've got a lot of different strategies that we've been using. I think, first of all, we are very much quality first and focus on accuracy. And in that, so many people have said over the last couple of days, we've leveraged the human in the loop approach. So in general, we take an incremental development strategy where, day one, we've always started processes manually, and then we'll kind of shift and go through an evolution where then we can kind of graduate things to, on our side, AI assisted and then semi-automated, and to the point where then even when we have fully automated a task, we still always have some human in the loop supervision overseeing the quality on our side within Outman in our internal operations teams.
Like for every single account?
We sort of break it down by processes and by account as well. So in terms of that quality control, I think a lot in terms of the layers of quality, sort of that classic Swiss cheese model, where the more layers you have, then the less likely it is for a defect to escape undetected. So we have a lot of those layers of quality control across the accounts that can span from continuous scanning, so automated sort of anomaly detection within the automated processes as well. So we use techniques like LLM as a judge, where we're using LLMs, and then every time we make a prediction, we have sort of an ensemble of models or a layered approach even there to build up our confidence when we are using AI to make some of those decisions. But then also we have dedicated people who are a part of that process as well.
There's a question here from Dave, like, are you fine-tuning a base model? My next question immediately went on to, like, how do you decide when you're using, say, an LLM versus something more ML or a bit more traditional or some just rule set? Like, how does that work internally?
One thing that also contributes to our strategy to earn trust is that we take a very domain-driven approach. So we're invested in our sort of domain model and our domain systems. So I think of that in response to that question, because we've really sort of decomposed bookkeeping and really invested in our understanding of the domain and how we kind of decompose it into its different component parts. That also helps us with building trust, because we are using that common shared language and making sure that the way that we approach bookkeeping matches and is very intuitive for our users and for our consumers of our bookkeeping. So then coming back to sort of the technology question around where we use LLMs, where we use models. I mean, I'm a big fan of what is the simplest thing, the most explainable, model that will get the job done, and really understanding that this is a system, and each different component of that system will have different features, which lends itself to different types of modeling or different types of techniques. I mean, there's plenty of cases where LLMs are not the right thing for the job, especially where it's very numeric and where either statistical models will do, or classic machine learning, something that's more geared towards that domain. But then we're also using LLMs as well.
Yeah, and then So you said, like, I get the human in the loop point from before and the explainability. But at scale, how are you determining, like, accuracy across all of these accounts, all of these things, from all of these models that are making decisions? How do you deal with accuracy?
Well, we have no shortage of data.
Right.
But because we are so leveraged on the human in the loop strategy, it means that in the development process, when we are first moving along that curve from sort of more manual to more automated, we are collecting a lot of data, and then we only sort of move along that curve when we've passed certain thresholds, and we have a lot of controls in place so that we know sort of what we want to target before we sort of remove some of the human in the loop supervision.
And what happens if it goes wrong? Like, how do you deal with that accountability and not just from a client management standpoint, but just to sort of like go back to correct your processes, correct your models?
So when things go wrong, so first of all, I think we really have to design in the first place for things are going to go wrong.
Right.
Like, we're never going to get this 100% right. And so that is a big motivation for maintaining the human in the loop strategy over a long period of time. Even as we approach increasing levels of automation, we maintain the human in the loop strategy because we know things are going to go wrong. I think there's also an element of sort of how do we manage the expectations of the end user. As I was saying earlier, it is really the end user who needs to have the confidence and the trust in the data, because they're going to be the ones acting on it. And they're responsible for their actions and for what they do with the data. So we need to, be able to arm them with the confidence, but then also the tools to inspect the data, interrogate the data. So that's a big learning that we've had over the last couple of years, which is that, I think at first we thought, oh, we'll do your bookkeeping. It's great. You'll just pick it up and you'll go and you'll be on your way and sort of getting things done. But it turns out to be a lot harder than that, and it does come down to sort of building that trust, but then giving that sort of visibility. So visibility into the whole process end to end, which then also gives people the ability to interrogate it to the level that they need to, depending on maybe the action that they're taking or the decision that they're making, so that they can for themselves build that trust and confidence with sort of the tools and the visibility that we are giving to them. And then we always have to have fallback mechanisms as well. So when it goes wrong, we need to be able to tag that. We need to be able to flag that, and then have that instrumentation so that we're catching the cases where it's wrong, and that feeds back into our feedback loops.
And how do customers? I'm fascinated by this idea that you're automating part of what has been quite a manual thing. Like, how do the humans respond? We all hate humans, right? We're all computer people. But how do humans respond, like, emotionally to this sort of autonomy in either what was part of their world or is now not part of their process, and they're getting this sort of output?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Whenever we talk to people and sort of explain the idea or the concept or the vision of Outman, I think we get a really positive response, because no one wants to do bookkeeping.
Right.
But everyone has to do bookkeeping, and everyone has that requirement in their business, and sort of various struggles or pain points with it. But then in practice, I think that, like I was saying earlier, we are sort of taking away some of the control, and I think especially when we're working with the accountants, there can be a little bit of a struggle or a resistance there, and so I think we have to think about ways where we're still sort of giving them some of that control back, doing it on their terms. Yeah.
I want to jump to sort of some questions. First one at the top here from Chris, but what is your vision for the future of AI bookkeeping, and how will we interact with it?
So our vision for the future of AI bookkeeping is that it will be autonomous, and that we look at automating the full end-to-end spectrum of bookkeeping. So from data acquisition, connecting to all of the data sources, whether that's, through open banking or integrations, or, also then more discrete sources of data like suppliers and their various invoicing systems, through to then, processing and reconciling the data, to then sort of packaging that up into all of the basic general ledger and trial balance, and then sort of the different types of reporting that we can get out of that. So actually, we were having an interesting conversation earlier during the coffee, but around sort of how if you go into your Xero or Sage or QuickBooks, you get a lot of reports and anything that you can dream of, if you can dream of it. And so there's a bit of a technical barrier to entry to using some of those products, because you have to be more financially literate. You have to know what you're looking for. So you might have a question as a business owner. You might have something on your mind that brings you to that data. But then you might get lost along the way, and you might, not exactly know how, like, which report will I find this in, or what, where should I go, or now that I have these numbers, how do I interpret them? So sort of the next phase of development that we're exploring is to turn that on its head, and to make the interface of bookkeeping more of a query system. So if I don't have that technical expertise, but I have the question, I'm a business owner, and I want some answer to a question that I have, I can actually just ask that question in natural language, and then depending on the preferences, and that can be quite personalizable, but we can get you the answer more directly to that question. And
probably with some explainability and some like, this is what this means in the context of,
put together,
regulations
we can put
or something.
that into a report, or we can say, you can find that in this report, or we can, generate that on the spot for people when they come in with those questions.
Gotcha. Let's go to another question from you guys. We only have a few minutes left, but then second question down. How do you determine a feature or use case that would benefit from AI, and what would be better suited to strong APIs and data exchange between services?
If the API exists, I'll take it. I'd always rather go with something that has sort of a strong contract that is deterministic. So for data acquisition especially, wherever there are APIs and integrations that we can do, I think that's the preferred method, but that's not always available. So in those cases, then we look to what is possible now with AI.
Good. And another follow-up from Chris. How are you judging your LLM as judge?
So it's all through the human in the loop sort of feedback system. So there's any number of points in the process where any data point can be reviewed. It can be reviewed on posting, but then it'll show up in any number of reports. So there's a lot of entry points in order to kind of catch errors. And then we have the mechanisms in place. So whenever an error is spotted, it gets tagged and flagged, and then that gets fed back in the system. So we really have a very strong mechanism for always measuring our AI and automation performance on the back of that.
Yeah. I want to jump a couple of questions down because we are sort of at the theme of trust, but is there anything in the bookkeeping space that you can't automate or automate yet? Like where are humans required?
Good question. Well, my head goes to a couple of different places, but one of the things that's been most interesting for me in sort of getting to learn more about the bookkeeping space is that kind of think about bookkeeping as data entry and data processing and getting things recorded into the system. And that's what it is on a good day, And really the challenges, the pain points that people express in bookkeeping is what happens when you don't have the data? Like, I have to go chase, my suppliers for invoices and statements, or I lost this receipt, or I don't know, what this bank transaction refers to, and
Sounds like
so it's much more like when you don't have the information, and it comes down to then we've understood it as a real communication problem, and how do we kind of identify when something is unclear or unknowable, who is the correct owner to reach out to in order to resolve some unknown, or where we're missing information in order to be able to process it correctly to sort of audit standards. I think that's harder to automate, but we're working on that.
Good stuff. Well, look, that was fascinating, and just if everyone could give Jane a big clap for that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.